Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Darwin Porter is our great celebrity writer who usually has something exciting to say and to talk about. Now, if you got your October issue, you will see that we have featured something very, very exciting that Darwin has done. And you know, Darwin, we talked about it. It's been the women, the president's women, right?
Yes, it is.
And I was amazed.
I specialize in that, Anita.
I know you do. So let's just tell me if that's what you wanted to talk about this time, or you want to talk about something else.
No, I want to talk about something we've never covered before that's dear to my heart.
Okay.
And I want to pay the tribute to the amazing work going on with baby boomers who are spending millions of dollars engaged in enterprises across the country, restoring our rich heritage of silent films.
Okay.
And I view myself as a film historian, and silent films have meant a lot to me. And right now, for example, Ted Turner really helped a lot on CNN.
Yes.
He has, they're picking up thousands of devotees. People, of course, it costs millions of dollars. People like Martin Scorsese, the director, is funneling money, and a lot of charity groups. Because now, I don't like to criticize our parents, but our parents did not really believe in saving this rich heritage, which was the dawn of the movies, which really began in 1895. And I also, in all my studies and over the years, sound was really delayed a decade. Most people view it as, it really didn't get going until 1929. But I have heard voices speaking perfectly as far back as 1919.
Huh.
And what happened is the theater owners thought it would take millions of dollars to convert into sound, and it would, but they thought it was just a passing fad, the way some people thought 3D pictures in the 50s. Of course, they turned out to be a passing fad.
Right.
And now, I have written extensively, and I want to do a lot more, because I knew dozens of silent screen stars, including leading ladies of Rudolph Valentino, who was Charlie Chaplin was the leading comedian, and Valentino was the leading heartthrob. Now you say, Darwin, how could you have known them? Valentino died in 1926 at the age of 31. Well, let me tell you, many of the people who worked with him, there was one actress lived till 1992.
Oh, see, so you were right there with that.
So let me tell you, I had three friends who were his leading ladies, and I knew his last Pola Negra, his last lover, who was Pola Negra. I want to tell you how, so I will have a little credential here, and I'm singling out Valentino. I could have talked about 50 other people, but we don't have time. Let me give you a quick overview. You know from a previous show that I knew Gloria Swanson. My boss worked with her in silent pictures. My boss, who hired me when I came and worked in films in New York, he arrived in Hollywood when he said a shepherd was driving sheep down Hollywood Boulevard. So he knew them all, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and Gloria Swanson, who used to visit here at my home on Staten Island. She came over to Staten Island every week to buy organic vegetables. She was a nut for organic vegetables. And she appeared with Rudolph Valentino in Blood and Sand, the famous bullfighting picture, she appeared with Valentino in Beyond the Rocks, which was lost for years, they thought, and then they discovered it in an attic in an old theater in Amsterdam, and they brought it back. And so anyway, that takes care of Swanson. and my best friend was James Kirkwood Sr., James Kirkwood Jr. He won the Pulitzer Prize for A Chorus Line, the long-running musical on Broadway. You may have seen it.
No, I didn't.
Well, it was a big hit. And his mother was Lila Lee, who he moved her down to Key West near my home there. And Lila Lee was his Valentino's leading lady in Blood and Sand, about the bullfighting. And I knew Mae Murray, who was danced with John Gilbert in The Merry Widow, the most famous musical of the silent era. And, of course, she lived on for decades. And, unfortunately, poor Mae got dementia at the end.
Wait, I have a question. About silent movies. Did the people actually speak? It just wasn't recorded.
That's right, but they didn't really particularly follow any script. I mean, they talked, but they didn't. Some of them didn't bother to learn their lines, so maybe a lip reader would wonder what they were talking about. But the thing about, I don't want to at any point ridicule them, because they turned out masterpieces. And let me give you an example. The other night, they've discovered Cleopatra, which was the first feature film ever made. And it starred Helen Gardner, like Ava Gardner, but Helen. Okay, so Helen was a bit overweight, and she had hair down to her knees.
Oh, my God.
Knees.
Oh, my God.
Not her back, her knees.
Huh.
And as I said, a bit heavy.
Right.
And she was not Claudette Colbert, Vivian Leigh, or the great Elizabeth Taylor. But the movie was fun. And I know it's a strange addiction, but it's affecting thousands and thousands of baby boomers who are now involved in this massive restoration of our heritage. Someone said, liking silent films is like your first drink of hard liquor. You have to take several glasses before you get the hang of it.
No, that's interesting. I want everyone to know. I jumped into this so quickly. This is Darwin Porter, who is a celebrity writer, so many books, I don't know, up to 30 or more. And he's calling in from Staten Island. And every book he writes, it's just one's better than the other. And I did send you a note on your last one about Bert. It was fantastic. I don't know where you got all those pictures from, but it was a great book, really.
Burt Reynolds, Mr. Florida.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Florida is true, but he made trouble everywhere, it seems like. Or
he loved Florida. He really did.
Well, that's where he came from. You're right.
Yeah.
But you love Florida, too. You know that.
Yes, I did. And in fact, this is off the subject, but doing the Burt book reminded me of growing up in Florida. And I sort of miss it, because Florida is very different now from the Florida that Bert and I grew up in.
How is that true? Just tell us a few things. Well, I don't want to get you off. I know you want to talk about the silent films, but
the population is so very different. I hate to say it, but when I arrived in, and this is not an endorsement, but when I arrived in Miami, it was still a small southern and segregated town, really. That's not why I liked it. I liked it. Palm trees, and they were selling alligator bags at booths along, and you couldn't walk down Flagler Street without running into 20 people you knew, and it was a different time, and I mean, things were weird, like Miami Beach. My mother worked for the last of the Red Hot Mamas, Sophie Tucker.
Right.
And she was the queen of Miami Beach, and I would rush home to from school to see everybody visited Miss Sophie. You know, she was the queen. And would Judy Garland be there, or would it be Frank Sinatra? One of the first couples I met was Ronald Reagan and his girlfriend, named Norma Jean Baker, who had just changed her name to Marilyn Monroe.
Wow.
And so it was a wonderful time to grow up, and I worked for Senator Smathers, who was the...
Oh, I remember.
of Florida, and he took me up to Palm Beach, and I met these two people named Senator Kennedy and his bride, Jacqueline. I mean, who wouldn't love all that, right?
Oh, wow, that is amazing. And of course, I was thinking about you when you were down in Key West when Key West wasn't as glamorous then, was it?
No. A lot of the buildings were unpainted. The old town had not been discovered, and I went ahead and bought a home there, and I negotiated. Are you sitting down?
Yeah.
I almost negotiated with Mary Hemingway for $10,000. She was asking for the Hemingway home.
Really?
And I could be down there with you taking admission now. You see why I missed? Of course, there were horrible troubles. There were horrible troubles, but it was just a wonderful place to grow up. And of course, I remember snow in 1957. It snowed in Miami.
Oh yeah, well that's I guess every once in a while. But let's get back to this whole new boomer idea. And you think it's popular because the boomers now have missed that? They don't know about it, or what's so attractive?
Well, I think they're beginning to see it's part of our history. Plus, once you get the gist of it, it becomes absolutely fascinating. And to think of all these, what happened? These films were made with nitrate often, and then many of them were put away. Some of the storage rooms burned down, and often then, if you open a canister, nitrate they turn to dust. So I love it with the way that they're doing all of this restoration. Plus now more and more people. In fact, some of the children or grandchildren of baby boomers are now insisting and working on this massive restoration. Now, literally, of course, it's expensive. Now, often what they do, there will be only 20 minutes left of a film, but they have the stills, so they can fill in by flashing the still on the screen and then telling you what happened. And as Norma Desmond, Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard said, we had faces then. And brother, did they. I've seen dozens and dozens of silent films. You never knew that was a passion of mine.
No, I never. This is the first time. This is really new for me.
Yeah, but I became addicted to it. And the great news is my boss, the one who arrived when sheep were going down Hollywood Boulevard, he introduced me to many of the stars. I went to work for him in 1960, and he found out I had the passion for old movie stars. And I came up with this idea because these people were famous around the world but hadn't been heard of in years. So I wanted to do a book, Whatever Became of Velma Banky, a goddess of the silent string. And I hunted them down. Now, in the case of Miss Banky, the Hungarian, she had a thick Hungarian accent, so the talkies ended her reign, but I found her with her husband, a matinee idol, Rod LaRock. They had what was called a lavender marriage back then, but they stayed together till the end of their lives. Just because you're married to someone for 30 years doesn't mean you have to sleep with them. But the point is, love came along. But the sad news is many of the stars I met, like Laura LaPlante, one of the first movie stars of all time, some of them fell on bad days. And some of them were heroin addicts or alcoholics. But many of them had transformed themselves into interesting lives. And they all filled me with stories of the glory days. In fact, if I could start working 18 hours a day, I want to do. I believe in the 18-hour workday.
I know you do.
I would like to do some special editions because I learned stories about these famous people that have never been written. All of them admitted to me that they were victims of the publicity department, which invented their bios. Well, and they said often the bio had nothing to do with who I was.
So, Darwin, how were they chosen to be stars?
Well, they were chosen by their faces. I mean, back then, for example, if they switched even to a character actor, I don't know where they found these people. They had wonderful things. The women were the most fantastic creatures ever put on this earth, and I really mean that. They wore these elaborate dresses, like when I'm Pola Negri. She's long before your time, but she battled with Gloria Swanson to be the vamp of the 20th of the silent screen. And now you say, Darwin, you've explained how you knew Gloria Swanson. Well, I had this friend called Greta Keller. You may remember Tokyo Rose. You've heard of her?
Yes.
In World War II. Well, Greta was an Austrian, the most famous chanteuse in Europe in the 30s. If you saw the movie with Liza Minnelli, Cabaret, that's Greta singing. And she recorded the first record of Lily Marlene, which was the biggest hit record of World War II. And then Marlene Dietrich came along and took it over. But it was the song best beloved by the Allied and the Nazi soldiers. So Greta had a penthouse she rented in New York, and she says, I rented it for the summer. I'm returning to Vienna, and I want you to go by every day or so and see that my tenant is all right at the penthouse, which is across from your friend Van Johnson. And I dropped in to see Van Johnson once a week. And so I said, who is this friend of yours? And she said, Pola Negri. Now, Pola Negri was the last lover of Valentino and had a famous affair with Charlie Chaplin. Talk about name dropping.
Yeah, right.
And she was wonderful. She told me these fabulous stories. So, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time, but I've got boxes of these stories that I accumulated on these wonderful people, you know.
So it's interesting that I don't really know anybody who was a silent screen. Now, Charlie Chaplin was silent, right?
Yes. Well, he was the major star. Now, the major female star was Mary Pickford.
Right.
And she was called America's Sweetheart. But then there were all sorts of other sort of second-tier stars that were... Let me just give you one example. King Baggett. Now, his first name was King, but he was the first king of Hollywood, even though his first name is King. This is long before Clark Gable took the title. And he was so famous with our grandparents, our great-grandparents, that he was called, his face was as familiar as the man in the moon. And see, all these people became these fantastic stars, and then they just sort of disappeared. Ramon Navarro became the first major American star. He appeared in Ben-Hur, which was later remade with Charlton Heston. And they seemed to, most of them didn't make it into talkies. It wasn't necessarily because of their voice, but when the 1930s came along, it seemed a different time. Our parents began to look at different stars, and that was the rise of all those fabulous stars like Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. Although Joan Crawford was a silent film star. And
I didn't know that.
Yes, she was, and she worked with a young extra whose name, and had shacked up with him, and his name was Clark Gable.
Oh.
And they both were in silent pictures, and I've seen them all. And Greta Garbo and John Gilbert were the on and off-screen lovers, and I've seen every one of those Garbo silents. And see, John Gilbert, people laughed at his voice. His voice was sort of high-pitched, and it didn't seem to match the macho image that he was creating on the screen with Miss Garbo. In fact, my boss worked in a movie called Love, which was told stories Anna Karenina. She later made it as a talkie. And lo and behold, his best friend was Philippe de Lacy, who I got to know. He was called the most beautiful child ever invented. Although when I met him, he didn't look so beautiful, but but he said his love scene with Garbo, he played her son, but they said the scenes between Philippe and Greta Garbo were so incestuous that
Really?
they almost they were practically making love to each other.
Oh my God!
In fact, I saw the reels of it again two nights ago, and so he said, I always call on Greta when I come to New York, and I'm going to see her this afternoon at 3:00. She won't see me for more than 2 hours, and I said, Philippe, you know I've worked with you in J. Walter Thompson, an advertising agency, for years. Oh, Philippe, I hate to ask, but would you like to have an escort to go see Greta Garbo? And he said, let me call her. Maybe she would be delighted to see you.
And you did?
So
and
I got to see Greta Garbo, and then I got to see her several times after that. But, I mean, to me, meeting Greta Garbo was one of the most thrilling things of my life. Here I'm a little barefoot boy from the Moonshine Center of North, and I'm meeting Greta Garbo and Gloria Swanson, and I owe it all to these fabulous people that I work with. So you can see where I developed this passion.
Yes.
In fact, even today, I see about 2 silent movies. I've never told you this before. I see about 2 silent films a week.
Do you really?
Yeah. Now, it's an addiction. Like, if you don't, like some people like to play on the golf course. I won't name any names. And some people like poker. But if you get caught up in this world, I find it very thrilling. And then also, you know, I fancy myself a film historian, and I think it's very important. Remember, these people really invented film, and film changed my life. I can't imagine living on this planet without turning on the television set or seeing a movie, you know. Of course, now everything in the world is put on. You can sit in your home and watch incredible things.
I know, but that's it, you know, and I think I go to the movies. I try to go once a week on Saturday night with a lady friend of mine, and I love that. I don't want to sit and watch TV all the time, Darwin.
I know it all depends, but the hours that I watch movies is that there are no movies being shown in theaters.
Oh, right.
In the early hours of the morning, but and I will do what I can to write about. For example, I've told you already. I got to know Marlene Dietrich mainly through Greta Keller, and Marlene Dietrich denied it, but I've now seen 19 silent films that she did in Germany.
No kidding.
And see why people resisted it. They said, the stars said, well, if we do it in English, that means that we will lose our international market. Because right now, Mary Pickford was voted the most famous woman in history at one time.
Really?
She and her husband went to Europe, and almost millions of people turn out. She was, as I said, she was more famous than Cleopatra. And now, this love that we had for these stars diminished, but just to me, it's wonderful to see the achievement they made. I mean, they turned out some powerful movies. I know they can be ridiculed, like the Keystone Cops, but they also did great dramas. Like Lillian Gish became a very famous D.W. Griffin star, and I got to meet her several times. And I'll tell you something probably no one knows, and Tallulah Bankhead was once a silent film star.
Really?
At the end of the World War II. And,
well, I know we're running out of time, but I just didn't understand. So when you were watching a silent film, you understood everything was going on without any words, right?
Well, the titles are put on.
Oh, the titles, yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
They didn't translate everything.
Yeah, right, I see. The way
also,
people looked and whatever they did, right? That's the way it was.
Yeah, but the actors had to express more with their face.
Ah, right.
And so you often even without the title, you knew. But the main thing is, I have never, with the exception of you, I have never met more incredible women than I have met in those silent screen stars. They might have been 50 or 60 years old when I met them, but they still had some aura and some glamour about them, and I was so honored to be in their presence.
You're just so easy. That's the thing. You are so easy. You just love women, and you're just so good about finding the very best in each one of them. And I think, are we ready to go? I think we have probably another, we're about time to go. I know that I was waiting so patiently to talk to you, and I didn't see the movie Judy yet, but I know, isn't that the book you're working on now?
Yes, it's the one I'm supposed to be working on, but I have a quickie that I have to get out.
A quickie,
on some of the most fantastic women of the 20th century, all stars in their own right.
Oh, you're great. Well, I love the October issue coming up and what you did about the president's wives. That's beautiful, and you're just my favorite guy. And I have to come see you one day. This is too long, Darwin. And I just lost my wonderful dog. I wrote that about, my little Charlie, and so I'm still mourning.
I have just 1 minute to thank you. Can I have 1 minute, or are you? Or
yeah,
you
1
wait?
minute. 1 minute.
Okay, they just made a film here called The Dream Eater, and the film crew wants to thank you for furnishing one of the props. I don't know if you remember, but you once sent me sort of a merry-go-round.
Oh, that's right. I sent you that merry-go-round.
Well, the production designer saw it, and he needed something by the child's bed to play this music because she'd been haunted by nightmares, and he found that wheel that you sent up here.
Great.
And so the film The Dream Eater owes you a debt of gratitude for furnishing one of their props.
I love you, Darwin. I love you. I love Dan. So we'll talk again. Thank you very much for calling us. Okay. Bye. Yeah. Bye, honey.